Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
Welcome into the Fantasy Addicts Fantasy Football Podcast. We are coming at you live on Twitch, recording on Twitch, and we will throw it up on YouTube. I am your host, Mike the Fantasy Addict, with co-host Nikki B.
That's me.
And we are talking about why you suck at fantasy football, Dynasty Edition.
Dynasty Edition it is.
So Dynasty, my favorite personally, as far as the different types of fantasy football that I've played, and it's just because you draft your team, you do one kind of startup draft, you got all your guys, and those are your guys. The only guys you can get are through trades, waiver wire, which is thin because the benches are deep, or through the rookie draft. So if you go back on YouTube, you check our last video that we threw up, that was the first round of this year's Dynasty rookie draft, talking about the incoming rookies. But there are a lot of mistakes that people make just if they're starting out in Dynasty, because it is different than redraft. There's more to consider.
Correct. It's completely different. I think Dynasty is one of those things. Once you take on the challenge, you get so much more invested in the outcomes.
In everything. Everything is more fun because of Dynasty. Free agency is more fun. Watching the NFL draft is more fun. Just learn about these rookies.
Right.
It's made everything more exciting for me.
I think it forces you more so to pay attention to other players and other games, because you don't get another shot next year to kind of reset. So you kind of have to keep an eye on the rest of the league to kind of see if you can pick up some value some places, or, you know, see what changes you need to make in your approach for the following season or seasons.
Definitely. So let's jump into some of the reasons that people suck at Dynasty.
Yeah.
So I'll let you lead it off.
You want me to lead it off?
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is kind of picking a strategy and then flip-flopping all the time. I've seen it in our league a lot, where people will, you know, acquire a bunch of draft picks and then sell off a bunch of draft picks. They'll buy old guys and then trade away old guys. Like, you have to kind of pick a strategy, stick to it, and, you know, ride it through, even if there's some rough patches, because I think people can get confused and end up making too many moves that are counterproductive.
I would agree. So one of the big elements of Dynasty is that you have draft picks for your future rookie drafts, and because you know that you're going to keep these teams and, you know, try to build them for years and years, you can trade for picks next year, the year after that, the year after that. So if you're just in a redraft league, you're not used to that element. Some people have keeper leagues where you can sometimes trade those picks or trade those keepers, but in Dynasty, it's tough to value sometimes, because just rookie classes, they change in the level of talent that's coming in. When we had that kind of year where we had Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery as the top running backs, they're a lot less exciting than this past year, where we had Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, Swift, all those guys. So just the jump in like the running back talent, one class to the other, it makes a big difference in how your strategy is. This year coming out, there's a lot of wide receivers on the board. So maybe instead of taking one in the first round, you wait and you get a good one in the second round. So that's a big piece of it. When we're talking about trades and involving those picks, one of the mistakes that people make is trading those picks at the wrong time. So when is the best time to take your future picks for a rookie draft and make those trades?
Well, I think it makes sense that when you're in season, right, you're playing fantasy football, you're in it week 3, draft picks are not as valuable at that time and point, because you're looking for production right then for that season. So honestly, the time to acquire picks, I would acquire them during the season. If you have some pieces on your bench that you know you're not going to use, or just collecting dust that you can actually cash in for you know, value now, you can acquire picks. But I think you have to wait until you get closer to your rookie draft to kind of deal some of those picks back away, because the fantasy hype and rookie hype is real right around draft time. Everybody has those guys. I already am starting to get a list of guys that I want to look at in the draft, and depending on landing spot, I may fall in love with a guy that
I'm going to get one for show. For show. I'm getting that for show.
I get it.
People fall in love with guys, you know, and then all of a sudden,
of course they do.
The picks
Nick especially, but
picks are coming off the board, and
not that there's anything wrong with it.
I love me some Jamar Chase.
I got it. Yeah, you're gonna need a high pick.
I know.
You have the 1-1.
I originally traded for the 1-1 so I could get Jamar Chase, and I'm doing exactly what I told you not to do. Except I traded for him at the beginning of the offseason. The number 1 pick is going to get more expensive as we go. So I did pay a lot to get the number 1 pick, but that pick will acquire value the closer we get to the draft. And I could sell that for a much more valuable piece than maybe a rookie.
Yeah, and if they have a guy, a lot of times the running backs go early in those drafts because they have kind of a shorter window. You need to replace them more often. They're, again, a wider pool of wide receivers. So you might be able to move back and kind of, get yourself a little extra value and still get your guy if you like Chase.
For sure. And I think that whole thing kind of leads into not buying into the overhyped player. I think we saw a very good example of it this past draft with Keyshawn Vaughn. We saw Tom Brady go to the Buccaneers. Everybody's like, okay, I need a running back. I've seen, James White in the past get a ton of PPR work. Keyshawn Vaughn's going to be the guy. I don't care about Ronald Jones or, McCoy, whoever else they have. They're going to get Keyshawn Vaughn. They're going to use him a ton. It's not a thing. Keyshawn Vaughn.
I made a mistake.
Yeah.
he didn't have the elite profile coming out of college, and I think this season he showed it. And people, I think, when you saw T. Higgins, go a couple picks later, Laviska Shenault or Chase Claypool, those guys went after where a lot of people took Keyshawn Vaughn, and that'll hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a little bit one of the mistakes people make is just taking those running backs, maybe overvaluing running back a little bit because, like you said, it's easier for you to go out and trade for a wide receiver that you can use on 100%. Your team than for a running back. But Keyshawn Vaughn, he was one that I was out on if you watch our early shows. I was just concerned about him because if you watch our last one, we did the way too early mock draft. And what we'll do is we'll kind of do research, figure out what guys have talent and are hyped up before the draft. Then after the draft, they're kind of the hype on them will change, so their landing spot. Keyshawn Vaughn was one that when I was doing my pre-NFL draft analysis, his name didn't come up as being a guy who was talented, a guy to watch, right. A guy who people were excited about. And then once he landed, people were thinking, this opportunity is good. He's going to be on a good team. People didn't like Ronald Jones, didn't know if he'd take a step forward, so they thought maybe he can take over. He catches the ball better than Ronald. And he was a guy that, luckily the way that the draft shook out, I didn't have to make the choice. But I was even thinking, man, if he falls to me, I'm going to take Zach Moss. And Zach Moss didn't have a great year, but he was, again, more of a starting piece. He definitely got a lot more usage, a lot more opportunity than Keyshawn Vaughn.
Correct.
Which is important with the rookies. You need a guy, he could have all the talent in the world, but if he's buried and not going to get on the field, it's tough to hold on to that guy all year and wait for him to develop.
Correct. I think you have to come in. You hear in the real NFL draft, we're going BPA. We're going best player available.
All right.
Well, I mean, that's all well and fine, except for we have to start at 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs. And I have a bunch of wide receivers, and I only have 2 running backs.
Yeah, you need more running backs.
So I have to acquire these pieces. But, again, if you draft that Keyshawn Vaughn guy and it doesn't work out and you could have had a T. Higgins, I can trade T. Higgins for a lot more value coming back to me than I can Keyshawn Vaughn. Or it happens time and time again. I know we're using this as an example, but every season it happens. You see these running backs, it's like, oh, they're going to the spot because this reason.
He's the guy.
We even saw it on a high-end scale with CEH.
I agree.
He was number 5 or 6, and then he jumped to number 1 because of landing spot.
You got bamboozled.
We'll see if CEH comes on and shows better in the future. And again, we do, in the past couple of years, it seems like rookies are coming on faster than in the past. It used to take guys a little bit longer to develop, especially wide receivers. But it still kind of holds true for tight ends. It's taken those guys a little bit longer to develop and really hit their elite stride. But you got to worry about it when you're making those calls. And
I think the counter argument would be you've seen undrafted guys like James Robinson do really well in a situation where they use them all the time. So, again, I'm not saying it's 100% correct, but don't buy into the hype a lot of the time. It'll come in to bite you, especially if you're a GameStop owner like myself.
There you go.
Oh, my. What a mistake.
Stonks go down.
It happens.
This is my nightmare.
It happens. Speaking of stonks going down, we're all about trading for aging vets that are declining in value, correct?
No, I am not. So we might disagree because your favorite player is AJ Green. So AJ Green, take a drink.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Another reason I think people suck at Dynasty fantasy football, or a mistake that people make, is just holding those guys a little too long. So Dynasty is a long haul. Your team, you got them.
Right.
That's the team you got. And the mistake that sometimes people make, it's kind of like the stock market very much. You want to sell high. So if a guy has a great year, maybe he's going to give you one more year of good production, but I'd rather sell him at his peak and then that next year where he was still usable for fantasy, but I can't get the same return for him. So we were talking before the show. There were, I believe, 2 wide receivers that were age 30 that were in the top 20 for wide receivers this year. You want to venture a guess?
I honestly don't know.
All right, Banjo, if you got a guess, anybody in the chat, you can throw it out. If you're on YouTube, see if let us know if you guessed it before I say it. But I'm going to go ahead and reveal. So the 2 were Adam Thielen. So that's one that's like, all right, that makes sense. And the other one was Marvin Jones of the Detroit Lions. So came on at the end of the year and finished strong. And there was a point in the season where people were kind of leaving him for dead. But then Kenny G never came back.
There was a Galladay situation.
Yeah, absolutely. But those were the 2 guys. So if I had them in Dynasty right now, this would be the sell time. And the teams that are going to be interested, maybe you don't sell them right now at this point before the draft, but if there's a team competing next year, and let's say Adam Thielen has like 10 touchdowns, he's still good, that's when you want to sell him, is when that team's competing and they feel like, all right, this one other piece will kind of get me over the edge where I can make a run and get this win. That's the perfect time to sell. Sell Thielen, get some picks, maybe get a younger asset. That's what you want to do.
And sometimes you got to make the move a year early.
Absolutely.
I'd rather be too early than too late, because that degrading asset can go from super valuable to nothing very quickly. So I think an example that I had this offseason is actually last offseason was Aaron Jones. I mean, you say Aaron Jones, he had another great season this time, and he looks good for free agency. But there's no guarantee. I sold Aaron Jones as a top 5 dynasty asset, giving up this season of production, which he was very good again this season. But next year, if he goes to the Jets or he goes to a situation that is less favorable and he doesn't get the same production, your asset value just went down a ton. So I got max value at the time, and I still got to recoup enough draft capital to get young running backs on my team, essentially.
Yes. So he actually traded Aaron Jones to another team. I bought Aaron Jones this year, so I made some of those. My team's in competition. We're going for it this year. I need the pieces to compete with the high-scoring teams. There's kind of an arms race in the middle of our dynasty season where just all of a sudden the trades got moving. People were looking for assets. A couple of the other competitors picked up some good guys. So I initially traded for Adam Thielen when he was kind of the wide receiver, I think, 1 on the year.
Right.
And then the running game got going. Justin Jefferson emerged. I looked at him. I'm like, all right, I know that Thielen's older. I know that he's going to decline. I needed him to be that number 1 guy for this year. And I flipped him for Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, part of what went into it for me is he's still in that age where he's going to be able to produce. Hopefully in free agency, he goes to a good landing spot. It'll be tempting for me to try and see how my team is going. If I don't look like I'm going to compete, Aaron Jones is exactly the guy I'm going to trade away this year.
Preseason or midseason?
I may trade him away if he goes to a great landing spot, just on the hype and kind of people getting excited about it. But likely it'll be if I don't think my team's going to make a run, he's still producing, and I can trade him to one of the competing teams.
Right. And if you're watching this a year from now, 2 years from now, and these people aren't relevant, I'm looking for the guys that are coming up on the end of their rookie contract, because there's no guarantee what place they're going to go to. There's no guarantee of a certain amount of production or opportunity at that place. I think you can see historically guys coming up on their second contract. We see it time and time again. Gurley, we've seen it this year with Zeke. Once people get their second contract, especially in a different spot, they tend to underperform. And that's what I'm trying to get rid of them, get my max value out, and cash in. I think if you're looking even right now, and I think example you would agree with is Zeke. I mean, Zeke just got his second contract. There's a whole bunch of excuses for why he had a poor season with Dak Prescott being out. But if he has a good week 1 or week 2, that might be the perfect person to get rid of while they're still hyped up and there's reasons for them to be better.
Yeah, Zeke would be one that I'd be probably trying to shop out now. I even was for a moment was considering trying to shop Christian McCaffrey. He's coming off a season of injury. He's a year older. I think you can still get, elite value for him because
he hasn't put up bad production.
No,
he's either been hurt or really good.
The 3 games he was there, he averaged over 20 points. He's still young. He's still on a good contract. He's going to be on the Panthers. So I'm going to hold with him just because I think I can get hopefully a good year out of him. And my team's still in that competing kind of in the top 4, top 5. So. But again, it's one of those things that when you want to sell them before the cliff. 2 guys this year that you could have sold, for a much higher value than they ended with. Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell are 2 prime examples of guys where if you had sold them at the beginning of the year, you could have got much more than now because you just waited too long.
Right.
All right.
I think Julio is another one. I mean,
Julio is a guy I'd be looking to sell. OBJ is a guy I'd be looking to sell. Some other aging wide receivers again. Thielen I'd be trying to move. Marvin Jones I don't think you can get that much for, but I want to get rid of him.
And here's the thing too. If I'm on the other side of it, let's say I'm a contender and I'm purchasing, I'd much rather purchase a name like that because that already has trade value in mind.
Yeah.
Look at AJ Green, right? AJ Green hasn't been relevant. He's old. He's probably not worth anything.
Agreed.
But somebody in our league is willing to give me a fourth. That's not a lot. I'm not saying that's
Not up in here.
but I just mean the name still is recognition.
Maybe Alex
for something. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but if I'm a contender and I can get a name for pretty inexpensive, I can get Julio Jones for cheap. I'm still okay with it because if I need to unload that player later on, I can probably still get some of it back. There's always going to be believers.
Yeah, and Julio is a prime example. What I've noticed is kind of a trend is you'll have these elite wide receivers. They come back, they play pretty well to start the season, and then they get an injury, and it kind of lingers, and they miss some time.
Right.
So people still have in their heads like, oh, I saw him. He still looks good. Like if he can just come back from that injury. And a lot of times a 24-year-old comes back from an injury a lot different than a 30-year-old.
Right.
It doesn't sound like it should be that much of a difference, but time and time again, T.Y. Hilton, he's a guy that was banged up last year, came back, didn't produce at the same level. There's a lot of those guys that you can just see. And again, so in Dynasty, basically 27 for a lot of wide receivers, kind of when they hit their peak. And if you can sell them kind of at 28, that's about what I'm looking for. So two guys that are getting up there, like Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins, are two guys right now that if you told people to sell in Dynasty, they might look at you side-eyed. But by the end of next year, you might look back and say, wow, I could have got a haul for him right now.
Here's the thing, though. We've been saying that for a couple of years now on Kelsey.
The elite guys. Tight ends seem to last longer.
And, yeah.
People haven't been calling for it for Hopkins just yet. But again, I believe he's 28.
Yeah.
And again, so just getting to that age. If you just follow the age rule, because I think if you were in Dynasty and you just simply followed the rules.
Talk about the
of
age rule. Go ahead.
So it's different for every class, but for running backs, kind of, that 24, 25, once they're getting over their rookie contract, that's a good time to sell because you're going to be selling them at peak value, and they usually fall off shortly after. Wide receivers, 28, 29. If they're really elite, that 29, 30 range. But for the most part, 27, they hit their prime, and then after that, they start to decline. So you want to sell them kind of right after that 27 season. And for tight ends, it's a little bit different. The freaks, they come back. Gronk and Kelsey, they're both 31. But again, for the most part, tight ends, they take a little bit longer.
Tight ends are tough because they can come out of anywhere.
And they're just really
Darren Waller
inconsistent.
coming from nothing 2 years ago.
But tight ends, generally the rule is that they take a little bit longer to develop. They last a little bit longer. So once they're getting around 30.
So I think in a rebuilding team in Dynasty, what can really set you apart and help you recover quickly is knowing what to do with rookies. So we had a season just finish up. All the last year's rookies seem to be getting traded around. Other people are buying last year's rookies that didn't do very well. Other people obviously are selling them. There's just a lot of movement going around with assets that didn't really have a great season, at their first shot at it.
Missed it.
So are you buying old rookies that didn't do well? Are you buying old players that had hype and had draft capital? Like, how are you approaching that market?
So that's another piece of advice. Maybe one of the things you're screwing up in your league is you don't kind of look and kind of get the real story of each rookie. You got to kind of do that autopsy. So why did this player have a bad season? If the player, Christian McCaffrey is a good example. So not a rookie, but why was his season bad? He kind of had some soft tissue injuries. They lingered. He probably could have come back and played if they were competing. They weren't competing. He's on a big contract, so they wanted to save him. He should come back, be 100% next year, and kind of go back to what he was. Other guys have more catastrophic injuries, we'll call them, where they actually tear an ACL. ACL usually at least a 1 year. Guys are coming back from that a lot better than they used to. But another injury that you see a lot is the Achilles, and that seems to be more of a 1.5 to 2 year window, and guys don't come back the same. In season, a high ankle sprain, a hamstring, those don't seem to linger into the next year. They will linger throughout a year because guys re-aggravate it, they push it too fast. But after a full off season of rest, they'll come back. Those injuries probably won't reoccur.
But still, let's say let's talk about Henry Ruggs for a second, right?
All right.
First round draft capital, you can apply this to Corey Davis. You can apply this to Mike Williams. You can apply it to a couple guys, right? Okay. High draft capital, not a great rookie season. I think in the 500 yards mark, like one touchdown. Are you buying or selling this player, and why?
So I'd be selling Ruggs because his health was pretty good. He had a couple little injuries, but you just saw how they wanted to use him. He wasn't commanding a lot of targets, and they had spent high draft capital on him. If ever there was going to be a year that they threw him the ball a lot, it would be this year. So I don't think the situation is going to get better. His quarterback situation shouldn't get better. He had his starting quarterback for the majority of the year. Bryan Edwards was one that's a little more interesting to me. He's on the same team. He was drafted in the 3rd round. He got an injury, so he missed a lot of time because of injury. It does take these guys time to develop, but really Waller was kind of the guy they wanted to throw it to on that offense. I don't see that changing a lot. The guy that I do like is Michael Pittman Jr. He's a wide receiver for the Colts that was a rookie this past year. And why I like his situation, T.Y. Hilton could be leaving. He had a little bit of an injury that he fought back through. He's got a good body size. He looks good out there. He had one kind of blow-up game. That's the time I bought him and was picking him up. Never really took off fully. But he's out there. He's getting involved. We'll see what their quarterback situation is. But a lot of things can change for him that would improve his situation, whereas with a guy like Ruggs, I don't think there's a lot that can change that will really help his situation.
I agree. I think I would break it down in a similar fashion of, now that I say that, I don't agree with that. I've read a lot of reports online as of late that essentially if they didn't get to the 600-yard mark, they're never going to be good. And honestly, it works out in like 90-95% of cases. If their rookie season, they didn't have at least 600 yards receiving, regardless of injury, because even highly touted guys that were injured the first year and didn't put up 600 yards still didn't become a thing. So it's kind of an easy, hard cutoff. Ruggs this year had like 540 yards. He's gone. I sold him.
That's an interesting way to do it.
I recouped as much value as I could. And honestly, if you don't want to put a lot of time into why is this situation better than this one? Why is Ruggs not getting targets and Pittman isn't getting targets, but we feel higher up? If you don't want to do all that legwork, I think you can use that system of, hey, if they didn't get 600 yards their first year, regardless of reason, I'm getting rid of them and recouping as much value. Because I think, look at J-Jaws, we had the same thing. Rager, basically any Eagles player. I think you're going to see it with
Rager's
Ruggs.
Interesting. Rager's another one that I put him in that area of like, so Alshon and Jackson were both not really around. N'Keal Harry, I'm pretty full out. Again, I've read a lot of things about how his separation is poor. He just not his physicality helped him when he was younger, and now the guys are better. So
Corey Davis would be your exception here.
So there's Devontae Parker, Corey Davis, some of those guys that take longer and they do kind of break out, but their situations both changed.
Right, but we've also only seen Parker have one good season, and we've only seen now Corey Davis have one good season.
But for those guys, you're likely not going to be able to get for them now, even after their best season, what you would have been able to get for them after like 1 year of down
and
after their rookie year, because people are like, okay, he had a bad year, but he's going to break out next year. We know he's good.
So I traded Ruggs for the 2-2.
Yep.
So I drafted him for the 1-8, sold him for the 2-2.
I think it's a good move. I could see being out on Ruggs.
Quick question from the chat here. Sohan, thoughts on Rashad Bateman? I know the hype is real. He's looking good. I'd have to watch a little bit more tape, but again, I got to wait to see where some of these landing spots are, because those are going to make a huge difference. We did go through Rashad Bateman and whatnot on our last YouTube video if you want to check that out. N'Keal Harry is good. He needs more opportunities coming from Pat's fan. He had some good catches. I did watch a little bit of him this year, especially towards the end of the year, but unless they get a really good quarterback in there, I'm out on Patriots for now.
Yeah, I just was reading an article about just how they kind of use the advanced metrics about his separation. He's just not getting good separation in the NFL is one of the big knocks on him. He hasn't had great quarterback play, but I think that I'd be concerned about Harry. I don't know if for Dynasty if he's ever going to produce. He's definitely not what they hoped he would be when they drafted him as of yet. But he could be a guy kind of like Corey Davis mold, where he was taken highly and he just takes a while, he gets a better situation, he kind of comes on a little bit, develops his game. But I'd be worried about N'Keal. So, Bateman, what do you think?
I think he'll be okay. It's landing spot based for me. But let's go back to why we suck at Dynasty.
Okay.
Because I think the reason people suck at Dynasty is, especially this season, overhyping the quarterback. I mean, I've seen offers, me having Deshaun Watson questionable, where he's going to end up or if he's going to play this season. People have been offering me like Dak Prescott for a first-round pick. You can't give up a bunch of value for a quarterback in Dynasty, right?
Yeah, so right now is interesting because I'm looking at a couple teams that only have two quarterbacks, and both of them are usually serviceable. We got one team with none. Alex got nobody. Just love on the Packers, but I don't know what he's building for 2027. I don't know what he's doing. It's a train wreck.
This is also why Alex sucks at Dynasty.
Yeah. I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, we'll talk about that's a whole nother show. We'll
That's a
talk
whole
about
nother
why
show.
Alex is a train wreck in Dynasty. We'll just send it to him. But
He's our inspiration for this episode.
no, I'm actually sitting on a couple quarterbacks, and they are hard to move. So, like, I've got right now Ben Roethlisberger. He's probably going to be the starting quarterback for the Steelers next year. You know, they were started the year undefeated for multiple games up into the double digits. Nobody wants Ben. I can't get a fourth for him. Maybe that changes in the year, but I've got another bunch of guys that, like, I think their value could peak. Jameis Winston, if he becomes the quarterback for the Saints. Sam Darnold, I just picked up off the waivers. I traded for pretty low for Baker Mayfield. So I've got more quarterbacks than I need. But the point is, like, I was able to get all these guys that could be very usable for my fantasy team for very little. So it's not that tough to find a quarterback if you're in a single quarterback. If you're in Superflex, totally different.
Completely different.
They're very important. You need $1 million. You want all of them, but
Correct. I
for a single
completely
quarterback
agree.
dynasty.
I've just seen people trade away assets for quarterbacks, and you can't do it. It sets you back so much. And we're seeing a weird trend the last 2 seasons, really, where if you have the better quarterback, you're probably going to win that matchup that week. And that trend's not going to stay forever. So in redraft, if you want to spend high on a quarterback and go against traditional thinking, I'm okay with it. You know, shoot your shot, go for it. But in Dynasty, again, it may take a year for the league to kind of catch up and come back to normal, but it's a losing prospect spending a lot of money on quarterbacks.
Yeah, and you can find them. Again, you can trade for them because there's 32 teams that are going to start a quarterback, and there's only 12 teams in the league. Let's say everybody has 2. There's still guys that are out there.
And Joe makes a good point. There's a ton of QB uncertainty in the league right now, and there's potentially 15 to 18 new spots or quarterbacks, moving spots this offseason. So
there's going to be rookies coming in.
There's no guarantees with them.
So next question, another one from the chat is Sutton undervalued in Dynasty. Man, he's coming off an injury. He's on a team that doesn't like to throw that much. Jerry Jeudy's there. Jerry Jeudy is another rookie that didn't have the full blow up. I'd actually kind of be trying to get him if I could.
So Jeudy over 600 yards, had like 60 or 70 receptions. I mean, a pretty good season.
Denver had a tough schedule
Sutton
this year, too. They played a lot of tough teams. So
and they had a terrible quarterback.
Yep.
So
they might still.
Again,
we'll see what happens.
If they don't get a quarterback, I'm kind of out on the Broncos for now.
But he's a guy that I'd be picking up, even if he has a couple more rough years of bad quarterback play on the Denver team. Like, he's still going to be usable, and then at some point he could, have a better situation where a better quarterback comes in or something like that. But Sutton, I have not personally been a Sutton guy. I traded him away early in Dynasty before he kind of hit his peak value. But coming off the injury on a team that doesn't want to throw the ball, he's got Jerry Jeudy there who's going to command targets. I think he's going to take a step forward.
He's good enough. It's just, can somebody get him the ball?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
What would you be trading for Sutton? Like
I'm not.
a player? No, a player comp? Would you rather have Sutton or like T. Higgins?
I'd rather have T. Higgins.
Okay, same here. I'd rather have Higgins. How about Mims on the Jets? Would you rather have Sutton?
I'd rather have Sutton.
Okay. So that's kind of where the bar is for Nick and I. I kind of feel the same. I think Sutton, if you could get him for cheap, I'd love to have him on the team and stash him and see what happens.
I'd rather have him. Yeah, they're almost everybody in the first round last year. I'd rather have more than Sutton.
Okay. Not Ruggs.
But not Ruggs.
Right.
Not Ruggs. No, not Rager. Okay, one last point I want to make on why we suck at Dynasty, or why you may suck at Dynasty, is going back to draft picks a little bit, because just because you have draft picks doesn't mean you have to spend them. There's a whole, not a conspiracy, but there's a whole theory on online where they'll acquire picks, and then once it's close to the draft, like we were talking about before, they'll trade basically everything and not actually draft players. So you're trading them for people that know their situation, know their production, know what you're getting into, or you trade them for the next year's draft picks. So you're always putting off picks to the following season, acquiring more, and trading for players, which I don't think is a bad strategy at all. If you can get some type of rotation down with that, and your league is susceptible to it, I think there's a market where you can acquire a bunch of good players. I think in our league, especially with how much people are willing to acquire picks now and how low people value actual players, I think it's okay to acquire picks, dump them, at the rookie draft for next year's picks and players, and never actually drafting somebody yourself.
Well, you got to draft somebody sometime, but
You don't have to.
you do. You need players to play on your team to win a championship.
That's what I'm saying. You use the picks to purchase players on other teams.
Gotcha. Okay, so when you're trading for future ones, you're going to take those. All right.
Trading
for players.
Correct. And then mid-season, you trade the extra players you don't need for assets. Like, let's say I traded for Curtis Samuel this offseason. I got him for pretty cheap, right? Mm-hmm. In season, if Curtis Samuel ends up starting a little bit hot, he goes to the Packers, right? I can trade him for picks. For the following year, I can probably get a first. Well, I just upgraded value. The person was never going to be in my starting rotation anyway, and they're not just declining value on my bench. And guess what? Draft picks, they don't lose value. They're always, unspent assets. So it's a nice asset to have versus players that are continually, degrading on your team. So I kind of like that theory. The problem with me is I get too impatient and I love to draft players. I love people, love getting rookies. I love diving into it. So that's not my style, but I think there's definitely a strategy to be had where that is a huge benefit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that just again, finding value, selling high, getting again just the peak, the most you can at the right time. But it's just a balancing act. You want to compete while still having your future kind of look bright.
Well, I think that kind of what it wraps up to
age. It's a balance of talent.
You got to have a plan, stick to it, and then it's all about managing your assets and not taking too many risks that you don't have to.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people making moves and trading a ton of assets away for young, unproven rookies because they think it's going to be a breakout or whatnot. That rarely happens. It rarely happens. You're much better off buying proven players and working with draft picks.
Just know what you get. Like, again,
100%.
Keyshawn Vaughn, if you traded that pick away for somebody you know what you're getting, then you don't have again, maybe Keyshawn has more value this year.
Honestly, you see it in the NFL. The Los Angeles Rams, right? They realize that they can't draft worth a damn. They can't draft at all. So what do? They just trade away their picks for players.
I get it.
They get Jalen Ramsey. They get Matt Stafford. They know, they spotted, hey, this is no guarantee. It's a crapshoot. Yeah. And people value these highly. I'm just going to trade them away, take the players, and put together a really good football team.
Yeah, and again, with Dynasty, it's just tough because you're giving up youth probably. If you could have a lot of those young running backs, they're highly valuable. We got a question in the chat about Kadarius Toney, so wide receiver. I think he'll go top of the second round. There's a lot of that group of wide receivers in that range where it depends on what you listen to. Different people value him differently. We'll have to see where he goes in the draft. That'll make a lot of movement. But if you look at him, he's just got a tough looking guy. He's got a good build to him. There's a lot of those wide receivers that people are hyped on that if you just watch their tape, they just look thin, they look small, and he's got a better build.
We got another chat here before I want to wrap up this Why You Suck At episode here in a second. But Banjo with a question. Going back to Julio, there are situations where keeping him is the best move, yeah? I think there are, for sure. If you didn't pay a lot of money for him or you're a contender, I think it's fine to hold Julio on your bench because he could be this year again another top 12 wide receiver. There's value for him on contenders. If you're not a contender or you don't think you're going to make a run and you're going to end up mid-season having to trade away players, I think it's okay to get rid of these assets because they're not doing you any good. They're not going to help you at all.
Julio is 32. He's coming off a season where he had injuries, missed multiple games. That, to me, is just the prime sell this guy now because if he goes out, gets re-injured or goes out and doesn't look good for the first couple games, his value is almost zero because of his age.
Okay, but Julio is not your average wide receiver.
But he's 32.
It doesn't matter. It's the same. I keep bringing up Tony Gonzalez. It's the same thing. These people that profile, same thing with Megatron. The people that profile as generational, just absolute dominating players, they play for a lot longer. It's just what happens. I think we're seeing it with Kelsey, honestly. They just don't break down as fast because they're just gifted physically. And Julio falls under that. Julio was supposed to be the best wide receiver for 20 years, essentially. So I think it's okay to expect him to be productive for another season or two, despite his age, assuming he doesn't get injured. I think the injuries are the biggest thing. I don't think he's slowing down or anything.
I think he's slowing down. I'd be trying to trade him.
That's fine. I'm glad we have different opinions.
But I wouldn't trade him for nothing. I'd be wanting to get...
I think this is proof that there's value to be had one way or another, depending on who's holding.
So let's say he is good this year. Unless you're competing, he's going to be that one piece that puts you over the edge. Best case scenario, you get him one good year. Whereas if you trade him away for a pick and you get a pick, you could have another good asset on your team for 10 years.
But if I'm trying to make a run and I've traded away other assets and I only have a second round pick left and I can get Julio to fill out a flex spot or a bye week guy, I'm in for that. I can't imagine who else you'd get for a second round pick that would give you the comfort level in your flex spot.
If I could get like a high second and a younger wide receiver with some upside, if I could get like Mims in a second, if I could get like even just a slightly younger guy.
Will Mims be more productive than Julio this coming season?
No, but he'll be that's good enough to flex.
It doesn't matter. If you want to win, you have to have the most points.
I don't think Julio's going to win you championships this year.
That's fine. All righty. That's what I like. We don't have to agree. Alrighty. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. You got anything before we wrap this up? I'm gonna keep the Twitch chat up. I'm just gonna end our recording here for the episode. If you have any questions about why you suck at Dynasty League or why you suck at anything, let us know. We'll try to answer them.
So there's another question we'll just answer in the chat real quick. Do you think that Chase could come close to replicating Jefferson's season because he outperformed Jefferson in college? I'll let you take it. That's your guy.
I think that's not for the Dynasty chat. So we'll end this episode. We'll come back to you real quick. Thank you for watching.
Jamar Chase is going to be good.
Don't forget to comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching.